to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co with you through till 7. Never mind Spider-Man. Starmer Man, apparently, is the crime-fighting force that we all need. He reckons fighting crime, making our streets safer, is a root and branch, bread and butter Labour issue. Is it? Are Labour the party to keep us all safe? And when it comes to benefits, and particularly mistakes in benefits, if somebody has been paid too much money, should they have to pay it back? If so, when and how? And by the way, what about if they didn't realise that it was an error and it was all the fault of the government? Should they still have their current benefits docked to pay it back? And I don't know about you, but I cannot help but realise these days that we seem to be paying so much more money for less in return. Council tax is just one example. Most councils hiking it as much as they possibly can, whilst announcing to us, hello everybody, welcome. Guess what we're offering you? A new service, a subscription service. You can now pay to get your bin collected, your green bin. Sorry, beg your pardon. Is that not what council tax is supposed to be in the first place? And it doesn't, by the way, just start and end with councils. So many people are at it now. Why are we accepting this? Why have we suddenly sleptwalked into a scenario where we're all so happily having our money taken off us for way less product services? Your thoughts? By the way, I'm joined tonight by a Labour councillor, a former Labour councillor, so I'm fascinated to hear what he thinks of it, because I think so many councillors are just basically spinning us a bit of a yarn. Anyway, your thoughts on all of that. But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Well, our top story on GB News today, the Albanian Prime Minister has denied many of the migrants crossing the English Channel into the UK are from Albania, saying it's simply not true. Edi Rama has been speaking from Chatham House in London after talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on tackling the small boats crisis. Mr Rama had criticised the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, for singling out people from his country, referring to some of them as criminals, describing those comments as disgraceful. He said he wants all Albanians in the UK to feel safe and honoured. Well, in other news today, the Northern Ireland Secretary has told Stormont leaders there's no negotiating the Windsor framework and it will become law. Chris Heaton-Harris has been holding talks over the Prime Minister's post-Brexit trade deal at Hillsborough Castle. And that's after a key element of the EU-UK agreement, known as the Stormont Break, was overwhelmingly passed in the House of Commons yesterday. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson described the Windsor framework as a sticking plaster that wouldn't work. But the Northern Ireland Secretary says leaders need to come together to make the deal work.
Well, the Windsor framework's not a sticking plaster. It's a solution to the problems that were produced by the protocol, and it will work. And the two sides to those negotiations which have concluded, the UK government and the European Union, are going to make that the framework work. Now I think it's down to the communities of Northern Ireland to work out how best it can work for them. I think it can work for them really well. I do believe it will herald, alongside the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, the next 25 years could be all about prosperity if everybody puts their shoulder to the wheel.
Now, the Labour leader has released the amount of tax he's paid on his income and capital gains tax over the last 2 years. Sir Keir Starmer says he's paid £118,580 in tax since the start of 2021. It's after the Prime Minister published his tax documents yesterday, which showed he paid more than £1 million in tax over the last 3 years. Parliament has banned the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok from all government devices. It follows security concerns from the House of Commons and Lords, but won't include personal devices. Scotland has followed suit, with its Deputy First Minister saying the ban will be implemented immediately. The decision comes as TikTok's chief executive faces questions at the US Congress over data security and user safety. Junior doctors in England will strike for 4 days between April the 11th and the 15th. The British Medical Association has accused the government of not being serious about resolving their pay dispute and says the Health Secretary has failed to make a credible offer. In response, Steve Barclay claims the BMA are demanding a 35% pay rise equivalent. The union says they won't stop until they're paid what they're worth. Now, the Bank of England has today raised the interest rate for the 11th time in a row from 4% to 4.25%. That's in a bid to slow down the rising cost of living. And it comes after a surprise rise in inflation, as well as a decision last night by the US Federal Reserve to raise its key rate by a similar amount. The central bank's also announced it expects the economy in the UK to grow slightly in the second quarter, revising a previous forecast that it would contract. News from Wales and the UK and Welsh governments have announced 2 free ports are going to be created in the country for the first time in a bid to boost the country's economy. The Celtic and Anglesey free ports in North Wales are expected to attract almost £5 billion in investment. It's also hoped they'll generate up to 20,000 jobs by the end of the decade. Now, a Nigerian politician has been found guilty of an organ harvesting plot involving a British hospital. Senator Ike Ramadu and his wife Beatrice and a doctor were found guilty of conspiring to arrange the travel of a young man to exploit him for his kidney. The victim, a 21-year-old street trader from Nigeria, was brought to the UK last year to provide the organ for the senator's daughter for an £80,000 private transplant. The case, heard at the Old Bailey, was a legal first. And lastly, the National Education Union has staged a protest calling on the government to urgently reform the school inspection system. The union is handing a petition signed by more than 45,000 people to the Department for Education, asking for it to replace Ofsted.
It follows the death of head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life waiting for an inspection report which downgraded her Berkshire school to the lowest possible rating. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Back now to Dewbs & Co.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Keeping me company, my panel, Daniel Moylan, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of PLMR Communications. Good evening, gentlemen. Nice to have you back. Lots of you guys getting in touch already, which is what I like, because it's definitely not just about us three here. It's very much about you guys at home. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch all the usual ways. GBviews at gbnews.uk is how you email me, or you can tweet me at GB News. Lots coming up for you guys tonight. I have to say, and I appreciate your sentiments on this because it's really, really annoyed me this afternoon, so it has. And I'm pleased that you guys are getting in touch in your droves already about this, because I'm whining tonight about why are so many councils putting up their council tax by the maximum amount, 5%, and more in cases, by the way. Lots of you getting in touch telling me that you're paying a lot more. But then they're reducing the services. So, for example, coming up with all of these, let's have these subscription services to collect your green bins for an extra charge. I beg your pardon. That's your job. That's what I'm paying you my council tax for, to collect the bins. I'm not having any of it, and I am wondering why we're in a situation where we're just paying so much extra money on so many different things and accepting so little when it comes to what we get in return. Anyway, your thoughts on all of that and that will be a bit later on in the programme. But top story, Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to make our streets safer as he launches so-called Labour's Law and Order plan today. He says that his one rule for all proposals would halve knife crime, it'll reduce levels of violence against women and girls, and it will see more offenders prosecuted. It sounds very good, I have to say. Is it realistic, though, really?
Very, yeah.
I
thought Keir's speech was very exciting, reassuring. He's got a record in terms of law enforcement, law and order that very few politicians do, with his work in Northern Ireland, including crucial reforms to the police service over there at a crucial time. And one of the big things he talked about today was about how crime disproportionately affects the working class more than others. I know you've had experience of this in your youth. Lawlessness, kids running out of control, and a lack of police on the streets. And I think he's talking about things that people want to hear talked about, and I think that it's very achievable because he's done it before.
Do you? Do you agree? Is it very achievable?
Well, look, we've got to be serious. Every politician says, I'm going to sort out crime. I've got the silver bullet, I've got the magic wand, and I'll sort out crime. None of them ever does in quite that way, because this is a very, very complex area. But the second thing I'd say is that the last person I'd go to for advice on this is Keir Starmer.
Why?
Because when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, his performance was woeful. If you saw the rape convictions, for example, that's one of the big things people are concerned about these days. Under Keir Starmer, he had to apologise for them after a bad inspection report. So, I wouldn't put a lot of trust in him to do it, but I wouldn't put a trust in any politician to say, I'm going to solve the problem of crime. It's much more complex than that. One of the bad things we've done recently, and I know that there are problems with the Metropolitan Police, but we're taking a sledgehammer to the Metropolitan Police at the moment. We're totally destroying morale of ordinary police. And these people are going to stop defending us, in effect. We need them. And the idea that you can scrap the whole thing and start again and everything, it's really, really bad news for law and order.
Well,
but that's where Keir Starmer is.
We discussed this when the Casey report came out, and I actually asked my audience, are any of you current or former serving police officers? And so many people got in contact because I was asking you, what is your morale like? Lots of people got in touch, both current and former. And they all said how demoralising it was and how people that were in the force were perhaps considering leaving. And I think it is. And one of my viewers, because I do read all your emails, by the way, not often when I'm on air because there's so many, but I always read them throughout my journey home. And someone said, anyone that wants to criticise the police, Michelle, should spend a day in the life of a police officer. They should put their boots, uniform on, run into danger with no idea what it is going to be at the end of it. And then, and only then, they were saying, can they criticise it? But what about the point, Kevin, that Daniel makes then about Keir Starmer's track record when he was responsible for the prosecutions?
Well, I mean, I think it's incredible that Daniel's brought up rape statistics. I mean, when the rape conviction rate has gone from 8.5% in 2015 to 1.6% now, and Keir Starmer was widely regarded as being a very successful director of the Crown Prosecution Service. He was knighted by our late Queen. So I don't think there's any substance to what Daniel said. And, you know, what people know out there is that the number of people who think that they see less policemen or women on the streets has doubled since 2010. And Keir Starmer, he was actively responsible for banging up and locking away dangerous terrorists. He feels it in his bones. And I think, you know, Daniel might be better advised to reflect on his former boss, Boris, who himself is well known as a lawbreaker and has received penalty notices to that effect.
I'm sorry, even Keir Starmer doesn't agree with you, Kevin. Here, if I just quote from him briefly, at the time he said, "The inspection report into the Crown Prosecution Service in London makes it clear that our performance must unequivocally and urgently improve." I mean, he didn't think they were any good. Well, and now you're telling me he's a great sort of Superman crime solver. Let's face it.
Well, no, on that specific, if you're going to quote that, Daniel, as chapter and verse out of context, the fact that as the leader of the organisation, he at one point acknowledged that a performance in one regional area needed to get better does not mean that his overall tenure was not a success.
Well, I don't think it was a success. But then, it doesn't matter.
Because you're a Conservative.
Doesn't matter. We've got to look
everything
forward.
about Labour is wrong in
but
your eyes.
No. It's Keir Starmer. It's nothing to do with Labour. Labour's nothing to do with Labour. Keir Starmer has changed his spot so often. This was Keir Starmer, the man who was supported Corbyn, the man who wanted to get out of the European Union, stop us getting out of the European Union, and use any trick to stop it. Now he doesn't want to do that. Now he doesn't support Jeremy Corbyn. And now he's transmuting himself into a great fighter against crime. His background as Director of Public Prosecutions was middling so-so at best. He hasn't got any magic bullets for solving crime because nobody has. He really needs a bit of humility about all of this and to acknowledge that there are real problems.
Says a pal of Boris Johnson. Humility for Keir Starmer. Are you having a laugh?
Well, Boris Johnson yesterday in that excellent performance, that completely truthful and convincing performance...
The BAFTA winning Boris.
Showed himself to be humble and respectful. Humble and respectful to the committee. He lost his temper occasionally when they kept repeating themselves.
Forever loyal, Daniel.
But basically, Boris Johnson yesterday showed why he should be acquitted, and he showed that he was not actually guilty of misleading Parliament deliberately and consciously, and that when he did inadvertently, he apologised for it at the first possible opportunity, which everyone accepts is the right thing to do if you inadvertently mislead Parliament. So I think what he showed yesterday was tremendous, and people have great confidence in him, and I'm sure the committee will acquit him now.
On police, Michelle,
yeah.
If we can segue back to...
By the way, a lot of my viewers yesterday, because we covered this, obviously, after the hearing had finished, and a lot of my viewers were saying, actually, they felt reassured by the performance of Boris yesterday.
Listen, this programme and a large chunk of the lovely viewers, right, they love Boris Johnson, OK? They are a minority.
This is the people's channel.
This is going to get me lots of lovely pictures, you know, so that I can, show my relatives, right? Most folks who watch this show are predisposed to be fans of Boris. They're not the majority. There's a poll out today about the Conservative grassroots who think he's done. But
Well, don't forget the majority, of course, did put Boris into power across the country.
Well, they did, absolutely, and I didn't deny that. But, I'd love to see that tested again tomorrow. But what I'd like to say on crime, which you raised about the police officers, the men and women who rightfully, the good ones, whose morale suffers in the wake of reports that are very critical, like this week that Dame Casey brought out. No wonder they're upset, because the system allowed bad apples to come in, and the officer who murdered Sarah Everard, and it does need reform. You know, my father-in-law's a former policeman. I love the police. I'm grateful for their courage and their service, but they've been badly served by this government.
Are you a police officer? And if you are, have you been a police officer for quite some time? Because I would be interested, when we say you've been badly served by this government, if you've been in power, I don't know, say beyond 12 years, do you notice and do you feel a difference? Do you feel, you know, I had such a great job and I was really cared for, say, I don't know, under a Labour government, and now it's really different under the Tory or the coalition? Do you notice a real stark difference? One of my viewers, Vince, has got in touch saying, ask Kevin, he's banging the drum for Keir's track record. What about grooming gangs in the north? What was his record on that?
Keir actually mentioned that in the speech today, I would say to Vince, and I think that most right-minded Labour folk think that what happened there was disgraceful. And Keir, he was very open about it today and said that he condemns the people who were involved in it, and, you know, as would any right-minded person who loves this country.
We condemn the people involved with it. That's hardly a policy statement to set the country alight or a prescription for solving it. The question is whether he felt any sense of responsibility given his
why would he?
Well, you're claiming, you know, he was this great...
Why would Keir Starmer be responsible for the disgusting actions of grooming gangs?
He was claiming, you were just a moment ago claiming he had this great crime-fighting experience and telling us about his successes. If I bring up an area where he failed, then you don't seem to want to answer it. I'm not blaming him personally for actually going out and encouraging people to do these horrible and inexcusable things. Of course not. But my question is, you know, there were failures as well. Do you have any...
That all happened under Conservative government, Rochdale.
Accountability for
you throw these generalisations in your lovely tones around with no specific reference to who was responsible in Rochdale. It wasn't Keir Starmer. He condemned it throughout, and he proactively raised it today as an example of the sorts of things that need to be tackled. When your government, Daniel, invests properly in the police and actually doesn't see...
Well, this is the government that's
when your government properly thousands
of extra police on the streets.
He's cutting right across me. I can't even get a sentence out. Right. When your government invests properly in the police, when people's fear of crime goes down, not up, and when there are more officers on the beat, then you can say those things. But the record is not good, and you're never accountable. You're in the Lords as a Conservative peer. You never seem to say anything decent about Sunak or anything he does.
Do you want to respond?
Well, I just want to say this is the government that's put tens of thousands of extra police officers on the streets.
But to restore them back to levels that they'd cut?
To put them back to the levels that we need.
But that they'd cut?
Yeah, now we need them, and we put them back on the streets. How many more is... I didn't hear the speech, Kevin, so forgive me. Did he say how many more police officers he'd recruit?
13,000 extra neighbourhood police officers and PCSOs. All of this...
PCSOs.
Hang on.
What's a PCSO? Isn't that a volunteer one?
No,
PCSO?
they're the community support officers. I mean, Daniel will recall from his time in London government the introduction of neighbourhood policing teams. It was originally championed by Ken Livingstone about allowing us to set the priorities of police at a grassroots, talking to local people, a great success. And everything that Keir Starmer promises will be funded and costed. And then the British people can take a good look and make their minds up. And they ultimately always make the right decision.
Madeline says, hey, can you tell Kevin I watch GB News and I love and despise Johnson. So no, not every GB News.
What's that lady's name?
Madeline.
Fine woman.
Madeline, why? What do you think? You should love people in public office and despise them. Why can't we just disagree with them? Why do we have to love and despise them?
It's only the left that loves loathing. I mean, even Keir Starmer said he loathed Boris Johnson. And whatever you think of Boris, it's the loathing, the feel that loathing is a normal thing in politics.
I think
is one of the most desperate things about the Labour Party today. Coming right from the top.
Loathing, and you know, everyone can use their own language about how they feel about political opponents. I would say that the feelings that many people have yesterday, Daniel, you saw that and you thought Boris did well. If you look online, there are so many people in the NHS who saw what he said, you know, and in public services who didn't have parties and farewell drinks, and they were quite outraged by it.
Indeed.
Yeah, and that was what got Keir going, was it? Right.
What do you mean?
I've never said anything.
Keir Starmer?
I'm talking about Keir Starmer. I'm talking about the fact Keir Starmer...
We'll talk about him quickly then, because I need to go to a break.
It's perfectly OK to say that you loathe your political opponents. And that's the tone of the Labour Party.
Well, the Labour Party...
You've never heard me say that about... I don't agree with Keir Starmer. I don't think he's as good as he's cracked up to be. But I've never said anything personal of that character.
Well, loathing just means, I think...
No, it means hatred,
passionately
hatred.
detest, doesn't it?
Passionate hatred.
Well, some people do feel that. I mean, I think, you and I...
It's a culture of
hatred. I go back to your judgment on Boris yesterday and lockdowns and all that.
A couple of my viewers, Barry, Brian, Darren, well, that's more than a couple, and a few more of you, actually, have asked a really simple question. How is Keir Starmer so confidently saying he's going to reduce violence against women and girls when, you guess what I'm going to say next, half the time he can't even define what a woman is? I do think you make a very interesting point now. I might get a quick response from Kevin on that one after the break, but I am going to go to a break. When I come back, I want to have some more of your responses, but I also want you to ponder this. If somebody has received too much money, basically, in benefits that they were not entitled to because of an error, and that error was not their fault, should they have to pay us, the taxpayer, back? If so, how, when, how much? Is it fair that the perhaps lowest paid in society, those people on universal credit, are having their wages docked, their money docked, sorry, the benefits docked, to pay back errors that were not their fault? Your thoughts? I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company right through till 7 o'clock with you. We've got Daniel Moylan, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of PLMR Communications Company. I will just ask this because lots of my viewers are asking the same question. How can Keir Starmer make bold statements like, I'm going to reduce violence against women and girls, if he's equally, seemingly incapable of defining what a woman is?
Keir's not incapable of defining what a woman is.
Well, he
at
thinks
all.
they can have a penis.
No, he doesn't.
I thought he did.
No, he doesn't.
I listened to a very odd, stumbling, mumbling interview where he was asked a direct question, can a woman have a penis? And instead of using his brains and saying no, he kind of went, oh, well, I really don't think that we should reduce this down to...
Well,
it was a very strange interview.
My understanding is that Keir and the leading team around him think that a woman is a biologically born female, whilst being really supportive of people's own separate gender identity issues.
Why does he think that, Kevin?
Think what?
Why does he think that a woman is a biologically formed female? Let me suggest the answer to my question, because he's written an article in the Express today.
Hey, look at Daniel, he's come prepared today on his red phone,
and he
hasn't he?
says, what we learned from Scotland is that you don't make changes that you can't bring the public along with, which is why in Scotland they should reset the situation. I think there are lessons from Scotland. The primary lesson is that changes which don't carry any public confidence are almost certainly not the right changes.
Thank you,
So
Daniel.
he's given up.
Thank you.
He's given up his commitment to genderism.
No.
Why?
Thank you for
Not
showing.
because his mind has changed, but because he thinks it's going to cost him votes.
Thank you.
That's what it is.
Quick response
He
and
still doesn't believe a woman is a woman. He's just hiding it for a couple of years.
I want to thank Lord Daniel Moylan for showing why Keir Starmer would be a Prime Minister that listens to the people of this country, respects them and is not arrogant. Thank you.
Still thinks that women could have a penis. Even so.
No, he doesn't.
Well, I'll let you guys be the judge of that, because I will move on. There's lots to discuss tonight, lots going on in this bizarre world sometimes that we live in. Right, let me ask you this. I asked you before the break. If someone's been receiving benefits that they were not entitled to in error, admittedly, perhaps it might not be their fault, it perhaps is the fault of the government, should they have to pay it back? If so, how and when? Because more than 1 million people have now had the universal credit payments cut for that very reason. I'll start with you on this one, Daniel. You know, if you're getting universal credit, then you're, you know, let's just be clear as well, perhaps you are working, but you're lower waged and getting your income supported with universal credit. If there was a mistake in the past, are you liable for paying that back?
Well, if the bank makes a mistake and puts money into your account that doesn't belong to you, you'd expect the bank to take it out again. The fact is, it was never your money and you weren't entitled to it. Benefits are an entitlement. They only go to people who are entitled to them. If you get more, then you're not entitled to it. Now, of course, it seems unfair, and of course, it can be very difficult for people who are on universal credit or other benefits to have less money than they expect because a repayment is required. And that's why I think the repayment provision should be as gentle and manageable as possible. But the principle that it's not your money and never was in the first place is important. Otherwise, what obligation do we have to taxpayers?
But if your bank shoved an extra, I don't know, just say 500 quid in your bank account, then you're going to know, well, what's that about? It's not mine. And some people might keep quiet, other people might ask the bank. But one of the challenges with the benefit system, it can be really complicated, especially if you're a first-time claimant, to try and work out what you are entitled to, what you're not entitled to. So maybe genuinely you didn't realise I wasn't supposed to have this money. So you've spent it in good faith.
No, I do understand that, but I don't think it's your money anyway. And the fact is, I think it does need to be returned because the taxpayer needs that money for other purposes. And as I say, I'd like to see it done in a way which is as manageable as possible and takes account of the fact that many people don't have spare money. But it needs to be repaid. And I think most people would want to repay it.
Kevin?
I think they'd say I wasn't entitled to this money and it should be repaid. What I don't want is to have it taken out in one lump sum or in a way that wrecks my life. But in principle, it should be repaid over time.
In theory, yes. But, I mean, the problem is there's a couple of things. Number one, this is happening at a time of, I would argue, unprecedented economic hardship. Number two is there's also a fact that lots of benefits that people are entitled to are not claimed. So there is room in the system for balance. And the other thing is that And I liked your comments, Daniel, about if it is to be reclaimed, it should be done gently and sensitively, because, you know, government also wastes billions elsewhere. You know, are we going after all the money that was paid out in COVID-19 contracts to people who set the company up a few weeks before down Matt Hancock's boozer? So I think people like consistency of the application of the principle of the use of our money, all of our money, all three of us here and everyone listening and watching. But in this instance, there's some real pain being caused to people who are already suffering, and it's troubling.
Yeah, and do you feel or do you worry that sometimes perhaps this particular government is a little bit out of touch because, I don't know, say, right, I'm going to dock from you 20 quid a month or something. For a lot of people in government, that 20 quid a month, you know, it's neither here nor there. It's just the cost of their coffees in the morning on the way to work. Whereas for some people, if they're really struggling, that 20 quid is the difference between, I don't know, can I create a food meal for this or that, or it really makes a difference to them. And do you think people in the government have a sense of the impact of that?
Yeah, I think any elected politician who represents constituents, from whatever party they come, is regularly, constantly in touch with people who are living at the margins. And they do understand the difficulties, and that's irrespective of party. They're holding surgeries, they're having people coming to their door pretty regularly who have got real financial problems. And I do think the one thing you can't say about MPs in this country is that they are out of touch with how ordinary people live their lives. And very often it's the ones in the greatest difficulties who actually present themselves at the door of the surgery. So, in fact, if anything, they get a skewed vision the other way. I think you really have to have the experience of being an elected politician, even a local councillor like Kevin and I have been, to understand the difficulties that people do live, because it really brings you into touch with them.
Yeah, and just to put some of this into context, by the way, apparently the Department for Works and Pensions overpaid £8.6 billion with a B, billion pounds in 2021 to 2022, and 6.5 of that 8.6 was due apparently to fraud. So I think there's a few different things going on here. Yeah. I think there are lots of innocent, genuinely innocent people that, you know, they put their trust in, they enter their data in the system, and then they trust what they get at the end of it. And then I think the flip side to that is then there are some people that do take the system for a ride. It's those people that, for me, should be hitting really, really hard. Those people that are knowingly defrauding the system. Ian says, I'm a retired benefit fraud investigator, and if somebody is overpaid benefits as a result of official error, then they shouldn't be required to repay. But if it arises due to a failure to declare a material fact or a change in circumstances, then they would be required to repay, in addition to possible sanction, including possible criminal conviction. John says, of course, people know what they're entitled to, so they know if they've been overpaid. But actually, the benefit system is quite tricky. And also, don't forget, you've got all different systems. You've got your universal credits, and you used to have your tax credits, and in some cases you still do. So I think it is quite complicated. Daryl says, Michelle, it is taxpayers' money. Pay it back. It is not yours. David, he's got a novel idea. He says they definitely should pay back any money they're entitled to, but perhaps it should be the civil servant who made the mistake that should be paying back the debt. And perhaps, David says, it might make them a little bit more focused. Controversial. What's your thoughts on that? Going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some more of your feedback. But a topic that's got lots of you talking already, I am pondering, why do we keep getting asked to pay more council tax? Don't forget, most councils, if not all, have hiked to the maximum 5%, and in some cases beyond. But simultaneously, they are reducing the services that they offer. For example, having subscription services, it's a laughable subscription services that you've got to pay now, for example, to get your green bins collected in some cases, pack it in, deliver the services that we are paying for. What am I missing? Your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 alongside me. Daniel Moylan, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of PLMR Communications. We've just been talking about benefits, repayments. Susan says, not often I agree with Kevin, but he's absolutely right on what you've been saying in terms of repayment. The government should be going for the people who defrauded the government in the pandemic. But you're also saying it's the incompetent government civil servants that are to blame. Jane says, please can you ask the Conservative Lord, that's you, Daniel, whether or not he thinks the MPs who diddle their expenses should have to pay their fraud back as well?
Well, that was quite a long time ago, and some of them, they aren't round now, most of them, but some of them did pay back, were obliged to pay back. A couple of them went to jail. I think it was a couple, went to jail, and a lot of them were obliged to pay back and did make payments. Yeah, they're quite right.
Some of these benefits debts, just by the way, that are being reclaimed at the moment, having stoppages or sanctions, shall I say, in the benefits that people are receiving today, some of those mispayments were decades old, just as an FYI to you all. Phil says, Michelle, you have got, your black top is absolutely covered in dandruff. Phil, it's not dandruff, it's fashion. You can't help some people, so I'll just move on. Right, council tax, talk about that instead. Have you had an increase in your council tax? I suspect the answer for pretty much all of us right now is yes. Many councils are allowed to put their fees up by 5%. Many councils have gone way beyond that in some cases. But the thing that is annoying me tonight is it's all well and good putting your council tax up if what you then do is deliver a better, or even, I'd settle for equal, quite frankly, equal service. But often this is not what is happening, and I have become aware of a so-called subscription service, which I actually think is lunacy, where people are now having to pay an annual fee to get, for example, green bins collected. People are paying an increased council tax and they're having their regular bin collections less frequently. I think it is appalling. And in the break, I've just found out I've got a combined 45-year experience between these two, have been local councillors. Kevin, I think so many of these councillors, they are just taking the mickey now, and I think it's outrageous and it should stop. Your thoughts?
You think they're taking the mickey?
Yeah, I do. I think if you're going to ask people with a straight face, particularly in these challenging times, you now need to pay an extra 5% or whatever it is. I think at the very least that council should be committing to, at the very least, the same level of services. When you then start trying to sell me this wonderful new innovation called a subscription service where you'll charge me to collect my bin, I think you're taking the mickey out of me.
So I don't think councils are generally trying to take the mickey. I think what councils have to do in law and provide for us is set down, right? And I think there are different, Daniel will have a view afterwards, there are different requirements of what they have to do. They include setting a budget, they include certain service provision levels. And to be honest, over time, let's keep it general, councils have had massive budget cuts. The cost of doing what they do has gone up in terms of staff, and often they do things that maybe the three of us don't always see. So they spend huge amounts on looking after children. The local authority has a legal role as a statutory parent often for kids in children's homes and being fostered. They look after social services, clean streets and schools. And I'm not sure, I mean, ideally, yes, you wouldn't pay anything for things like this garden waste collection, but sometimes they haven't got the money to do that, and so people are asked to pay extra. In defence of most councillors, they do it, you don't do it for the glory or the money, it's about trying to make your locality a better place, and I apply that to most parties.
I think loads of local councillors do it for the power trip.
Do you?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
I can think of a few local councillors that I've crossed paths with, and I look at them, and I honestly think you've got a bit of small man syndrome, You're doing that job to make yourself feel a bit more powerful. But maybe I'm just being mean, and I'm certainly going off topic. Anyway, back to the... by the way, you two are not small men. They're very tall men, so I'm not applying that to these two, just to make that clear.
I think you are being a bit mean, Michelle.
Why?
Because I don't think most of them are on a power trip. I agree with Kevin about that.
I didn't say most of them, I said a lot of them.
Well, a lot of them, or whatever. I don't think they are. But still, the fact is, let's get real about this. First of all, this is not green waste. This is garden waste, specifically garden waste. The local authority is not obliged to collect your garden waste included in your council tax. That covers your domestic waste, what comes out of your house. It doesn't cover what comes out of your garden.
Isn't your garden part of your house?
If they've been doing this, if this council has been doing it for free in the past as a service, which is good, and they're now saying we can't afford it, you're going to have to pay for it, but they're perfectly legally entitled to it, you are getting a freebie. That's what I want to say. You're getting a freebie, and the freebie's been withdrawn. The second thing is, what we're seeing is, and I keep making this point, Kevin laughs at me, what we're seeing is that the country is running out of money to pay for the public services it wants. And you say they put the tax up council tax up 5%. Inflation alone is 10%. Inflation alone is 10%.
So do you think they should have been able to hike it more than the 5?
No, I don't think they should be able to hike it more than the 5. I think what we've got to get used to is the idea that public services, we're going to have to be more selective about the public services we offer, because we can't afford them all.
Right.
This country blew the money in COVID.
Right. On one point, Michelle.
Well, no, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to press pause on that point. And I'm going to come back. No, I'm going to come back to it because I think he makes a good point. What he's saying, what Daniel's saying, is it's perhaps time now to press pause and look at what we are getting as public services. Have we had it too long, too good, and now we have to have a bath of reality and look at what should we be getting as part of our council tax. So rather than try and squeeze you in quickly before the break, I'm going to go to a break, let you guys at home ponder it, and then give you time to answer it properly when we come back.
Too
What a treat. I'll see you all in 2. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Daniel Moylan, who's the Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of PLMR Communications. And as we've just figured out before the break, everyone, on this panel, me excluded, obviously, we have a combined 45 years of local council experience. So who better then to have this conversation on the topic that's getting all of you guys talking at home, I can tell you, which is about council tax, the increases in council tax, what it should include, what it should exclude, and if it's all right for them to have these weird subscription services for your green bins. Anne says, Michelle, you don't even know what you're talking about. Green bins are recycling, i.e. cardboard, paper, and brown bins are for garden waste. No, Anne, it's not the same all over the country. Different councils have different bins, different rules, different collection days. The whole thing, I would say, is a bit of a mess. They're trying to standardise it, but that has not yet happened. Every day is a school day. There you go, Anne. Your thoughts on the question that we were just pondering before the break was, is it time for a radical rethink of what we're getting? Have we had it too good for too long?
Right.
This is a really important point because...
Oh, right, OK. Everyone, you need to listen. It's told you. Important.
This is so important. And we all need to hold this thought all the way up to the next general election because urbane, mellifluous voices like Lord Daniel Moylan will tell us we've had it too...
Mellifluous?
Mellifluous. Honey-like, right? And they say in lovely tones, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. This country spends less on public services overall as GDP percentage compared to most of the European countries that we want to beat, right? We're roughly 42%. France is at 55%, Germany somewhere in between. We're poorer currently. It doesn't have to be like this. And when any political party tells us we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we have to look at what are we actually investing in the country we want. And I would argue that at the moment, when we look around us and we see so many things failing, it's not that we're not spending enough, it's that we're not spending enough, not too much, OK? It doesn't have to be like this. And where Daniel gets his assertion that we can't afford it, for a major Western economy, it's not true. The statistics show we spend less.
We're spending less and less in relation to private economic activity. Profitable economic activity. We have a public expenditure, which is 42, I think it's slightly more, but I'll go with 42%, up from 35 only a few years ago, under Labour, actually, up from 35. But on top of that, because we have a very large privatised utility sector and infrastructure sector, you are paying effectively. The government is effectively running those businesses, and they are an arm of government as well. And we are paying charges to them, although they don't count as public expenditure. They count as private expenditure. They look like businesses, but they're not businesses. Water companies are not businesses because they actually levy a tax on you. They don't charge. You don't pay your water rates, you get into trouble, you get taken to court. It's a tax. Same with the electricity now. Government sets the prices. They're basically not private companies anymore. So you've got this huge number.
Well, they are private companies.
Well, they don't operate like private companies. They don't go out and compete. They don't set prices. They don't operate like that. The government sets the prices for them. Then, when you take all that into account, we are spending a fortune in this country through the public sector. We can't afford to carry on like this. And Labour is going to have to confront that.
Well,
if they come into power.
If Labour is given the honour and privilege of governing, they will. But, I mean,
They will, but they won't confront it by spending more money.
Well, you've just distracted the debate. The utility companies, which, of course, your government privatised, are not the issue. Police, councils, hospitals, we're not spending enough in the right way.
Linda is in Spain. She says, in Spain, the bins are emptied every day. There's very few potholes and the police are visible everywhere. Cheap buses and trains and all the rest of it. And you say it's only about €384 a year you have to pay. Lots of you are getting in touch, too many of you to read out your names, saying all of this business, Michelle, is just going to lead to increase fly tipping. Lots of you also are agreeing with what I said about there is an awful lot of people that do get into local councilorships for their own power trips. Lots of you getting in touch telling me just how much your council tax is. Graham, I feel sorry for you, Graham. Your council is Croydon. I mean, look at the absolute state of Croydon Council. I think they've had to declare intention to go bankrupt. I think it is about 3 times. I feel sorry for you, which leads me to ponder a good question. Should councils be able to invest your money in the pursuit of profit? I don't know. You tell me. That is all I've got time for. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Thanks to everyone at home too.
Good evening. I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Tomorrow will be pretty similar to today. Some sunshine, plenty of showers blown along by gusty winds, being created by a big area of low pressure out to the west. We do have this waving weather fronts covering the southeast through this evening, making for a pretty soggy end to Thursday. Outbreaks of rain slowly clearing away from East Anglia and the southeast, but lingering until around midnight across parts of Norfolk. Following on from that, you can see the low here and lots of showers piling in, certainly for Scotland, Northern Ireland, North Wales and North West England. Further south, it should become a little drier through the nights, not especially cold. We start Friday at 6s and 7s. We also should start with quite a bit of sunshine over the Midlands, Eastern England and parts of the south, but the showers will develop. Plenty of showers across southern Scotland early on, and you can see the showers breaking out by mid to late morning pretty extensively. So nowhere immune. Where we see the showers, they'll be heavy, perhaps even turn into thunderstorms. They should tend to zip through on a brisk breeze and between the showers, but a sunshine, seeing temperatures again climbing into the teens. The wind's a little lighter over central Scotland, which means the showers here could be quite slow moving. And through the evening, lots of showers packing into Northern Ireland. Pretty wet end to the day here, and that wetter weather sweeping into southern Scotland during the evening as well. And that leads into a showery day again on Saturday. Perhaps not as many showers across parts of the south, but a chance of seeing longer dry spells. And the far north also turning a little drier, but parts of southeast Scotland, northeast England, again seeing lots of showers through the day. Again, quite mild but quite windy in the south, but it's starting to turn a little colder. These northerly winds picking up across northern Scotland, bringing a chillier feel, and those northerly winds will spread further south as we go through the weekend, so that by Sunday it is much colder everywhere. Goodbye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.